never shared my secret with any soul.
This creature is a force more powerful than us.
He is coming.
There is a devil in this world, and I have met...
At the start of the movie, a girl named Ellen, her voice trembling, is seen pleading for a guardian angel to come to her. After repeatedly calling out, she closes her eyes, and moments later, she hears a voice that prompts her to open them again. Entranced, she follows the voice to a door as it says, "You have awakened me from an eternity of darkness." A shadow behind a curtain speaks, "You are not meant for humankind," and Ellen begins to levitate. Next, we see Ellen walking out of the house as the voice asks, "Shall you be one with me for all eternity?" Ellen swears, then begins to moan, but suddenly, an entity grabs her by the throat, and she starts convulsing violently, experiencing severe fits. Years later, Ellen suddenly wakes up from her sleep, now married to Thomas. Concerned, Thomas approaches her and asks what happened, to which Ellen replies that she had a dream, and he embraces her, reassuring her that there is nothing to be afraid of. Later, on his first day at work, Thomas thanks his boss Canuck for the opportunity, who congratulates him on his marriage and calls his wife beautiful. He then mentions a foreign count interested in property in Weisberg, and when Thomas offers to assist, Canuck reveals that he has chosen Grunwald Manor. Surprised, Thomas asks, "Isn't that place a ruin?" To which Canuck explains the Count specifically requested an old home and is willing to pay generously. Thomas agrees to meet him, but Canuck clarifies the infirm Count cannot travel, so Thomas must go to him. Canuck adds, "Secure this account, and you'll secure your position," and when Thomas asks for the client's name, Canuck says, "Orlock." Thomas returns home and informs Ellen that he must leave the next day for a 6-week journey, but reassures her that his friend Harding has agreed to look after her until he returns. Ellen asks, "Why have you killed these beautiful flowers?" and then angrily tells him to throw them out. Ellen sits and pleads with Thomas not to go, and when he asks why, she says, "I must tell you about my dream." Thomas urges her to move past such thoughts, but she explains, "It was of our wedding, but not in a chapel. Above us was a thundercloud, and you weren't there at the altar. Instead, death stood before me, dressed in black. Yet, I was so happy." She describes exchanging vows, turning to see everyone dead, their stench horrible, yet feeling joy in her embrace with death. Ellen then bursts into tears, to which Thomas dismisses it as a foolish dream and insists all is fine. But Ellen insists it's a warning. Thomas reassures her, promising a better future, but she pleads, "You mustn't go." That evening, Thomas takes Ellen to the home of his friend Harding, who lives with his wife, Anna, and their 2 daughters. Later that night, while Thomas is asleep, Ellen cuts a lock of her hair and places it into a locket. Meanwhile, we see Canuck performing some kind of black ritual saying, "My lord, it is exactly as you requested. He will soon be under your control, and I will stay here with you, near the subject of your agreement." The next morning, Ellen gives Thomas the locket and asks him to write to her every day, and he promises he will. Thomas sets out on his journey and stops at a gypsy settlement along the way. There, he meets the owner of an inn and asks to stay for the night, explaining he has an audience at Castle Orlock. The innkeeper warns him never to speak of the castle, and another man urges Thomas to return home. However, when Thomas offers to pay the innkeeper double, he agrees to let him stay. An old woman leads Thomas to his room, warning him against visiting Castle Orlock, calling its shadow a waking nightmare. She gives him a crucifix and urges him to pray before she leaves the room. That night, Thomas sees a group of people leading a virgin girl on horseback, chanting, "Guide our stallion to the unclean spirit." Curious, he follows them, and after some distance, the horse starts neighing, and the group begins shouting, "A vampire's grave is ahead." They exhume the vampire's body, and one of them instructs everyone to remain quiet. Then, he stabs the corpse with an iron rod, and Thomas tries to stop them. But just as everyone turns to him, he suddenly wakes up in his bed and notices that his shoes are covered in mud. Later, when Thomas steps outside, he is shocked to find that the entire settlement is deserted, and even his horse is nowhere to be seen. Thomas continues his journey on foot, having no choice but to press on. After traveling a long distance, he arrives at a crossroad where he notices something moving toward him from afar, and as it draws nearer, he realizes it is a horse-drawn carriage. Paralyzed by a sense of dread, Thomas remains rooted to the spot, and when the carriage nears him, he closes his eyes. But the next moment, he finds the carriage has come to a stop right in front of him. Its door opens automatically, inviting him inside. In a trance, Thomas steps forward, and as he reaches closer, he is lifted into the carriage as if by an unseen force, and as the carriage begins its journey toward Orlock's castle, wolves appear from the shadows, chasing it relentlessly. Next, Thomas finds himself standing at the gate of the castle, where he spots Orlock in the distance. With a mixture of awe and reverence, Thomas bows to him. Orlock, however, doesn't acknowledge the gesture and quietly walks away. Thomas steps into the castle, and the gate begins to close by itself behind him. Thomas then comes face to face with Orlock, who coldly commands, "Leave your conveniences and set out the deed and sit." Thomas asks, "Would you not wish to wait until morning?" To which Orlock replies, "I wish you to do as I request." Thomas moves forward, saying, "Of course, sir," but Orlock corrects him, "Lord," saying, "I will be addressed as the honor of my blood demands it." Thomas, trembling with fear, asks for forgiveness as he takes the deed from his bag, and Orlock commands him to sit. Thomas complies, and as he sits on the chair, Orlock says, "I am most impatient to lay my eyes on your covenant papers and my correspondence with your proprietor, Canik." He adds, "I have long awaited them," and in the next instant, Orlock appears beside Thomas, pouring a drink into a glass, and he offers it to Thomas, insisting, "Drink." Shaken, Thomas reluctantly accepts, and as he takes a sip, he finds Orlock sitting in a chair, silently reading the deed. Thomas says he has some questions and tells Orlock that, last night, he saw a band of gypsies who ventured into a small birch grove and exhumed a corpse. Orlock replies that it is their filthy ritual. When Thomas asks what kind of ritual, Orlock angrily warns him not to speak of it again, causing Thomas to tremble in fear. Orlock continues, "How I look forward to retiring to your city of modern minds, who know nothing of, nor believe in such morbid fairy tales." Orlock then asks him to eat, and scared, as Thomas picks up the bread, Orlock asks if he's married, causing Thomas to accidentally cut his finger. Orlock warns, "Take heed what you do," and offers to ease the wound. Horrified, Thomas looks at him, and Orlock suggests he come by the fire, noticing Thomas looks unwell. Next, Thomas finds himself by the fire, and in horror, he watches as Orlock slowly approaches him. Frozen in fear and unable to speak, Thomas sits still, and the scene cuts to black. The next morning, when Thomas wakes up, he begins searching the castle for Orlock. While exploring, he enters a room and finds a mirror, and to his horror, he notices bite marks on his chest. Suddenly startled by rats, he drops the mirror. That night, Orlock presents Thomas with the agreement and asks for his signature as a solicitor. When Thomas examines the agreement, Orlock explains, "It is written in the language of my forefathers." Orlock then notices Thomas's locket and remarks, "A maiden's token," asking, "Your bride?" Orlock extends his hand, asking, "May I?" And hesitantly, Thomas hands him the locket, saying, "We were recently married, and incidentally, I have letters for her that I would like to post if I may." Orlock smells the locket and says, "You are fortunate in your love," before again requesting his signature. Orlock then opens a box and says, "I dare not neglect your commission," extending a bag full of gold coins toward Thomas. Breathing deeply, Thomas hesitantly signs the papers with trembling hands, and once he finishes, Orlock takes the papers, saying, "Now we are neighbors." Thomas replies, "It is my good fortune." And curious, he asks, "Why such an antique residence as Grunwald Manor?" Orlock simply answers, "The covenant is signed," to which Thomas thanks him and congratulates him on his new home. Orlock responds, "It is late, and you must wish to retire," to which Thomas replies, "I wish to depart as soon as possible." as I have been enduring the most irregular dreams, and I am feeling ill," Orlock says. "It is a black omen to journey in poor health, so you will remain and rest well." He then leaves with Thomas's locket, leaving Thomas alone. The next morning, Thomas wakes up to find more bite marks on his chest. Terrified, he attempts to flee the castle, only to discover that all the exits are locked. In a panic, he spots a door and, using a rock, breaks its lock. And when he opens the door, he finds a set of stairs leading down into the basement. He descends the stairs and enters a dimly lit tomb where he discovers a coffin. Perplexed, Thomas slides the lid open and is horrified to find Orlock's corpse inside. Terrified, he grabs a pickaxe and attempts to stab Orlock, but Orlock grabs the axe and throws it aside. As Orlock stands up, Thomas flees in terror, with wolves chasing him, but he manages to lock himself in a room. Orlock smells the locket, muttering, "Your husband is lost to you," and extends his hand, saying, "Dream of me," causing Ellen to unknowingly leave her room, drawn by Orlock's eerie influence. Meanwhile, Orlock exerts control over Thomas, forcing him to open the door. Orlock then slowly enters the room and approaches him, and Thomas, in horror, watches as Orlock moves closer. Suddenly, Orlock grabs him by the neck, lifts him off the bed, and begins drinking his blood. The scene shifts, showing a clear view of Orlock in his demonic form as he sucks Thomas's blood. Dr. Sievers examines Ellen and suggests she is suffering from a neurological condition. He recommends that she sleep in her corset as it promotes correct posture and improves blood circulation. As they speak, Ellen begins to murmur faintly, saying, "He is coming to me." Noticing this, Sievers decides, "I will increase the ether." The next morning, Thomas wakes up to his horror, finding wolves in the room. Panicking, he quickly gets to his feet as the wolves lunge toward him, and in a desperate attempt to escape, he leaps out of the window and plunges into a lake below. Meanwhile, Harding informs Ellen he has no updates on Thomas and that Canuck is missing. Ellen responds, "I never liked that man, and I will visit his office myself." But Harding objects, she cannot go alone. Stepping closer, he adds, "I understand your passion and won't fault you for this lapse in judgment, and ensures someone is sent daily until Canuck is found." Anna pulls Harding aside, urging him not to be rude, to which Harding responds, "You shouldn't get caught up in her fanciful notions," claiming the whole household revolves around her whims. But their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a scream from Ellen. Meanwhile, Sarah informs Sievers of a patient downstairs who killed 3 sheep with his bare hands and was eating them raw. Curious, Sievers meets the man and asks for his name, to which he cryptically responds, "I am just his servant." Sievers asks, "What do you have there?" To which the man gleefully says, "Gifts, bestowed upon me by his lordship." Just as he's about to eat a pigeon, Sievers asks, "His lordship?" And the man, who is revealed to be Canuck, exclaims, "He is infinity," and then shockingly bites off the bird's head and consumes it. Sievers, taken aback, asks, "Why would you do that?" and approaches Canuck, saying, "No one wants to hurt you." Canuck suddenly turns to him and cryptically states, "He is coming." When Sievers questions, "Who?" Canuck replies, "It was he that invoked me. I was chosen to serve him, for I know what he covets." Canuck continues, "He shall cast upon you curses, confusion, afflictions, rebukes, for you have forsaken me, and he shall reign over all of your empty corpses." Canuck then lunges at Sievers, prompting Sarah to call for help. Later, Ellen begins having seizures again, and Sievers urgently asks Harding for assistance. Sievers then informs Harding that Thomas's employer, Canuck, was admitted to the hospital that morning. Shocked, Harding asks, "Did you speak to him about Thomas?" To which Sievers reveals he is mad, and while engulfed in some sort of religious mania, he shares a similar motto to Ellen, "He is coming." Meanwhile, a nun discovers Thomas's unconscious body lying near the lake, and in the next scene, we see that a few nuns are bringing him to their church. Sievers tells Harding about a specialist named Franz, who is the sole person who may be able to diagnose Ellen. He describes Franz as an eminent physician and scholar from Zurich. Harding tells him to send a message to Zurich, but Sievers reveals that Franz is here in Weisberg. Shocked, Harding asks why he hasn't told him this earlier, to which Sievers explains that recommending Franz has been difficult, as he was tossed out of the university and laughed out of his home country. Sievers adds that Franz became obsessed with occult work. Meanwhile, in the church, a priest performs a ritual and reads prayers over Thomas, causing him to wake up taking Orlock's name. The nuns tell Thomas that Orlock was a black enchanter whose soul was preserved by the devil, allowing his corpse to walk in blasphemy. They insist he stays, declaring Orlock's evil cannot enter the house of God. Thomas explains he came to sell a house in Weisberg to Orlock, but the nun warns Orlock cannot leave and must return to the cursed earth where he was buried. Meanwhile, aboard a ship, a box sits ominously as Orlock's voice echoes. "Soon I will no longer be a shadow to you, and we shall be as one." He commands nature to intensify the thunder and speed his journey on the wings of barbarous winds. Thomas borrows a horse from the church and sets off for home, ignoring the nuns' attempts to stop him. Meanwhile, on the ship, people start dying, believed to be a plague. The captain orders a quarantine, but one man insists their cargo is cursed, and suddenly, another man vomits. Professor Franz visits Ellen and inquires about the spells she has experienced since childhood. Ellen explains, "Sometimes it feels like a dream, and I always knew what my Christmas gifts would be. When my mother would pass, and father would find me wandering in the fields of the forest, as though I were his little changeling girl." She adds that as I grew older, it worsened. I was so very alone and longed for comfort. Then came a presence, the nightmares, and the seizures. Eventually, Papa found me lying unclothed and condemned me as sinful. She says he would have sent me to a place I dare not name, but it all ended when I met Thomas. And through his love, I became normal again. But now, my dreams have returned and are darker. She then asks the professor, "Does evil come from within us or from beyond?" That night, Ellen has a seizure, and Franz declares her trance has begun. Observing her unresponsive pupils, he says, "She is no longer here." He asks Ellen, "Do you hear me?" And when she nods, he continues, "What do you see?" Ellen says, "Enduring night, a specter of death. He spreads his shadow, and he is coming." Franz asks, "Who is coming?" But Ellen begins shaking violently and then suddenly bends. After a moment, she collapses, and Franz commands the demon to hearken to his voice. The demon responds, "I shall join you nightly, first in sleep, then in your arms. All will be abomination, knee-deep in blood, with none to bury the dead." Ellen then collapses, screaming, "You are promised to me." And as Franz tries to calm her, she cries out for help. Franz declares, Ellen is cursed, explaining a spirit. Perhaps a demon possesses her. Harding is skeptical, and Sievers says the professor is speaking metaphorically, but Franz insists it's no metaphor. Sievers questions his studies on hallucination pathologies, but Franz replies, this is not one. When Anna asks how this happened, Franz explains demonic spirits prey on those ruled by animal instincts. Sievers argues women of nervous dispositions invent delusions, but Franz counters that Ellen is uniquely receptive to cosmic forces, possibly the same that overtook Canuck. Sievers asks if the cases are connected, and Franz says that is the question. Anna links it to Thomas's disappearance, but Franz warns the evil bound to Ellen poses a grave danger. Meanwhile, a man determined to confront the devil to end the plague heads to the cargo hold. And as he approaches the box, Orlock lurks silently in the shadows behind him. The man opens the lid, only to discover rats inside, and suddenly, Orlock attacks and kills him. On the other hand, hearing Canuck's cries for help, an orderly rushes to his cell to assist him. However, Canuck attacks and kills him, and then he escapes from the hospital, screaming, "His lordship is here." Ellen rushes outside, shouting, "He is here," and she sees Thomas on his horse, but as she approaches him, he falls to the ground. They bring Thomas inside and he says, "I feared I would never see you again." He then admits that she was right and reveals he has her locket. Just then, someone knocks on the door, and when Harding opens it, he finds a group of officers standing outside. The officers take Harding to the port to show him the ship, and shocked, he comments, "It's a plague ship." Meanwhile, Canuck is seen taking Orlock to the Grunwald Manor. Next, Orlock tells Canuck that the broker lives, to which Canuck replies, "I shall stifle him out." But Orlock responds, "I have use for him." Canuck kneels and approaches Orlock, pleading, Instruct me and use me, asking, shall I fetch unto you the pretty belonging? Orlock coldly answers. The compact commands that she must willingly repledge her vow. Canuck insists, yet I beg. But Orlock strikes him down, declaring, your pleas have become audacious, and you will ask for nothing from me. Sievers shows Franz a dead man, pointing out that he displays all the symptoms of a blood plague. And what's perplexing is that the body is completely devoid of blood. He then shows bite marks on the corpse's chest, saying, no rat has jaws this size. Franz asks, where is your lunatic? Insisting, you must take me to him immediately. But Sura interrupts, revealing Canuck escaped and killed a porter. Franz insists the man must be found, and as he prepares to leave, tells Sievers, fetch Harding, and meet me at my residence tonight. That night, Thomas, restless in his sleep, mutters, get off me, and suddenly starts choking. He tells Ellen he can't breathe, and abruptly pushes Ellen away as Orlock's face flashes before his eyes. Frightened, Ellen goes to sleep in Anna's room, seeking comfort, and Anna reassures her gently, saying, God is with us. Franz tells a doubtful Hardling that we have not become so much enlightened as we have been blinded by the gaseous light of science. He explains that he has battled the devil, just like Jacob fought the angel in Peniel, and that to control the darkness, we must first admit that it's real. Then, he reveals that they are here encountering the undead plague carrier, the vampire Nosferatu. Meanwhile, Orlock visits Ellen, and she confronts him, saying she felt him crawling inside her like a serpent. But Orlock denies it, claiming it's her nature, not him. Ellen insists she loves Thomas, but Orlock responds that love is beneath her, and reminds her she is not of humankind. He tells her that for centuries, he lay as a loathsome beast in the darkest pit, until she awakened him and stirred him from his grave. He declares she is his affliction, which Ellen dismisses, saying she doesn't care about his afflictions. Orlock tells her they are bound by fate, and reveals that her husband sold her to him for a sack of gold, breaking their marital bond. Ellen accuses Orlock of lying, but he insists it's true, and says the agreement can only be completed if she willingly accepts it. Ellen says she hates him, and furious, Orlock pushes her down and asks if she wants him to prove his hatred. He warns her that he will leave her for 3 nights, and tonight was the first, and by denying herself, she will cause him to destroy the lives of those she loves. Ellen accuses him of delighting in her suffering, but Orlock warns her that by the 3rd night, she must submit, or he will kill her husband. Ellen screams, and suddenly wakes from her nightmare, and to her horror, she hears Anna's ragged breaths and finds her on the floor, with rats devouring her flesh. Next, it is revealed that the plague has spread across the city, overwhelming the hospital, which is now full. Ellen tries to convince Harding that she is cursed by a demon, but he hesitates and tells her that he wants her and Thomas to return home. Meanwhile, Sievers suspects that Canuck is responsible for the plague, but Franz argues that Canuck is not Nosferatu, but insists he must be found since he made a pact with the shadow. They both go to Canuck's office and discover items that convince them of his involvement in the events. Franz tells Harding that Ellen and Thomas are in danger and insists on seeing them. Harding replies that he sent them home and asks how this perversion can be killed, to which Franz admits he doesn't know, as he has never encountered Nosferatu firsthand. Frustrated, Harding complains that all of Franz's lectures are just recycled from bloody books. But Franz explains that methods to repel or destroy Nosferatu differ by region and are unreliable. However, one constant is that it must return to its burial earth before the first crow of a cock. When Sievers asks what happens if it doesn't, Franz replies, that is the question. Harding insists, there's a real plague killing real people. He then begins to leave but turns and calls Ellen mad and says she should have been locked up long ago. He adds that Anna was bitten by rats and declares they are leaving Weisberg tomorrow. When Sievers mentions the quarantine, Harding says, I won't let your madness kill my wife. Franz warns that the night demon has fed on Anna's blood and will return, but Harding scoffs and tells them to leave. Meanwhile, Ellen reveals that she has brought this evil upon them. She admits that she sought company and called out for it. At first, it was sweet, but then it turned into torture. and it would have killed her, but it was Thomas who gave her the courage to be free of her shame. She says, "That devil is my shame and melancholy, who took me as his lover then, and now he has discovered our marriage and has come back." Thomas tries to calm her, but she pushes him away, saying, "Don't touch me. I am not to be touched." Ellen stands by the window, taking deep breaths, but after a moment, she turns to Thomas and says, "You stopped writing to me." He asks, "What?" And she asks, "Did you not think of me in that castle?" Thomas says he did, but she continues, "He told me how foolish you were, how you fell into his arms like a swooning lily, and how you sold me to him for gold." She accuses him, saying, "Our love was supposed to be sacred," and asks, "Where is your money? Your promotion? Your house? And have you paid back kind Harding your debt? Have you repaid him with the plague that infects his wife?" Thomas explains, "I left for our future," but she cuts him off, saying, "It doesn't matter, and we should never have married." Then, in a fit of despair, she screams, tearing her dress as she falls to her knees. Thomas watches in horror as she groans and looks up, her eyes completely white, and she sticks her tongue out. Thomas, horrified, says, "I'll send Sievers," but she screams, "No," and then she crawls toward him, promising, "I will be good." But her expression changes the next moment, and she says, "You can never please me like he could." In a moment of frustration, Thomas picks her up and throws her onto the couch, then begins making love to her. She says, "Let him see our love," but suddenly, her face turns demonic, and she begins laughing, saying, "Without you, I will become a demon." Shocked, Thomas rushes to her, picks her up, and says, "I love you, and you are safe with me." Ellen begins crying, saying, "Keep away from me, as I am unclean." But he responds, "Never." Ellen then warns him, "He will murder you if I don't go to him. We will be torn apart, and the world will be filled with despair." But Thomas reassures her, saying, "I will kill him, and he will never harm you again." Franz reads the book they found in Knock's office and learns that Ellen must offer herself to the demon, lying with him in a close embrace until the first cock crow. The book reveals that her sacrifice will break the curse and free them from the plague of Nosferatu. Meanwhile, Anna wakes up to her daughter's screams and tries to wake Harding, but he is unconscious. Desperate, she rushes to her daughter's room, and to her horror, she watches as Orlock kills and sucks their blood. Orlock then throws the bodies aside and moves toward her, and the scene cuts there. The next day, at the funeral for Harding's wife and children, Harding accuses Ellen of causing the tragedy and tells Franz to take her away. Sievers and Thomas try to calm him, and Thomas, insisting that these nightmares are real, shows Harding the bite marks on his chest as proof. Franz declares they will destroy Orlock tonight by sanctifying the burial earth and destroying the sarcophagus, leaving Orlock without sanctuary at cock crow. Ellen walks Franz to his door and says, "I know it must be me," to which Franz replies, "I fear Nosferatu is impervious to any of our iron stakes, and I am convinced that only you possess the ability to redeem us." As he leaves, Franz turns back and says, "In heathen times, you might have been a great priestess of Isis, yet in this strange and modern world, your purpose is of even greater worth." He says, "You are our salvation," and adds, "I will keep your husband at bay tonight." Ellen asks Thomas to promise not to return until Orlock is destroyed. He agrees, and she says, "Orlock has no power over you, and I place my absolute faith in you." Later, they learn Harding has left, and Franz comments, "He carries a heavy grief," suggesting they wait until sundown, but Thomas insists they must find him, worried about his safety. They arrive at the graveyard and find Harding dead, holding his wife's corpse. Thomas insists, "I can't bear this, so we must move onward." And when Sievers asks, "Should we not return home?" As Orlock must have risen, Thomas replies, "I won't wait until morning." Ellen calls Orlock, saying she's ready, while the others reach his coffin. Sievers removes the lid, and Thomas drives an iron rod into it, only to find Canuck inside instead of Orlock. Canuck declares, "I relinquished my soul and should have been immortal." But Orlock only cares for his pretty bride. He urges them to strike again, calling himself blasphemy, and Franz wastes no time and kills him. Meanwhile, Orlock approaches Ellen and asks, "Do you accept this of your own will?" She replies, "I do." He begins drinking her blood and continues through the night. As morning comes, he looks toward the window, but Ellen stops him, urging him to drink more. Soon after, a rooster crows and Orlock realizes he has made a grave mistake. Orlock rises and looks toward the sunlight out the window, and as Ellen rises and cradles his head in her trembling hands, Orlock screams in agony and dies in her arms. Shortly after, Thomas arrives to find Ellen barely clinging to life, and he watches helplessly as she takes her final breath and dies before him. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky.